few years ago, modernisation was really important. You know, following Blair, everything he did was about modernisation. Around the election, modernisation, you don't see that so much in his speeches, and instead everything is about responsibility and the big society. The big society, possibly because it's really crap, has then fallen out of fashion, and he's still talking about responsibility. And interestingly, and this is what I mean by interchangeably, he started talking about modernisation again. Okay, probably need to move on a bit. My paper was all about explaining those principles, putting in some evidence and theory, fleshing it out. I don't have time to do that now though, so instead I'm just going to take a quick look at one bit, that responsibility discourse that he's really fond of. I did some textual analysis of all his Cameron speeches, as I've said, and this key word, responsibility, and associated concepts comes up like, 5, 6, 7, 10 times within speeches. The message is clear. Various other groups, principally though not always Labour, have been irresponsible. Cameron is in complete contrast, responsible. But this is much the same from the Tory party. It plays very much into their claim that they're the natural party of government. Cameron is responsible, we can trust him. We're in a mess, but he'd never have got us into it. Others did. Others are irresponsible. It's political genius. There's a slight problem though. It's just not true. Really central to Cameron's message is the claim that New Labour were irresponsible in one key way. They were fiscally irresponsible. They ran too much of a budget deficit, failed to fix the roof while the sun was shining, and so on and so on. Well, for the rest of the time I've got, I want to say something about the veracity of that message. So, I pulled up the budget surplus and deficit figures for the entire post-war period, supplied by the Office of National Statistics. Over that period, from 1945 pretty much till now, although they're a few months out of date, the image looks like this. I've included this. I need something to point with. I've included this faint line on all of my graphs, which is actually the period average. It's like a budget deficit of about 3, whatever these scaled units are, perhaps 3 billion, maybe. Yeah. That's awkward. The initial graph is itself a bit odd, given that Cameron's message is that New Labour were clearly and demonstrably irresponsible in a way that the Tories never would be. Well, actually, the Thatcher period here shows a pretty clear and sustained budget deficit, which is worse than the whole period average. It only came up over that again with the Lawson boom here, responsible for this period of growth. And that's really great. That was great for Britain because it led to this, which is this massive crash under Major and huge budget deficit. Interestingly, after that, we see Labour come into power and, what's this, raise a massive budget surplus. We hear all kinds of sound bites about how big the deficit was on various dates, principally dates that happen to coincide with this bit. But is the picture that creates true? Well, let's cut off the banking crash so that we've got the picture right up until immediately before it happened. They were running a bit of a deficit at that point, agreed. But it's half the size of the major deficit, looks very much like it's just the other side of that peak. And importantly, most interestingly, note that the line is curving back up. Look how close it is indeed in 2006-07 to the period average, if not that close to zero. So we can play with numbers and see just how irresponsible Labour were actually being. We can apply a period average trend line and then extrapolate it forwards to see where we were going. The shocking news is that rather than irresponsibly driving us into the ground, it looks like Labour were right on course for a budget surplus had the crisis not hit. Of course, when we're dealing with a period that large, the numbers get a bit messy, so we could confirm this better with a look at the Labour period alone. So that's the whole period. We can then cut off the effects of the banks crashing and extrapolate that trend line forward. We can see that they were well on course to lead us back towards breaking even. Small wonder then that Cameron never opposed Labour's spending plans until the recession hit. Why on earth would you? They were perfectly stable. What we're left then is considering why exactly he's portraying them as irresponsible. I believe that the answer lies in this game of statecraft, of elevating his own image by opposition to a mythically inferior opponent. I haven't had time to go, there's loads of great literature out there on Cameronism, what it involves, which I heavily recommend. What I wanted to do rather than going through that is demonstrate that he's employing a lot of these discourses which may or may not actually be true. So when you look at Cameron is XYZ, what I really want to say is that you have to consider but you should probably never trust him because he's a liar. We'll start with Bill Reddings. In his book, The University in Ruins, he states, "The contemporary university is now a survivor of the era in which it defined itself in terms of the project of historical development, affirmation, and the inculcation of national culture. It is basically transforming itself from an ideological arm of the state into a bureaucratically organized and relatively autonomous consumer-oriented corporation in which what exactly gets taught or produced as knowledge matters less and less." This is sort of just a rough idea of what's going on in the moment. Interesting evidence of this is the position of the administrator rather than the professor as a central figure of the University of Excellence. The pursuit of excellence is addressed to the administrator as such, and it comes with a package. Corporate logo, university merchandise for the public expression of symbolic belonging, I'm sure we all have these, and the obsessive adoption of market research following the customer service assumption that everything can be quantified in order to accumulate information relevant for the development of capital growth strategies. For example, our own university mentions excellence as one of its 5 core values, stating, "We are committed to excellence at the heart of everything we do." Due to its obsession with health and safety, which is also in the campus environment, it also reduces the prospect of political action by students to risk assessment exercises, and it reduces politics to a discussion about risks that should not be taken, seeing the high court injunction and banning occupational style protests here. The Changing University has also taken steps to use media and technology as an enabling tool for education, research, and communication. Due to the increasing use of web-based learning system, current undergraduates, and therefore also the next generation of academics, have never had a non-digitally mediated experience of the university. Because of this, the dimension of academic work has changed dramatically, affecting dialogue and publishing speeds less traceable and contrastable. So while it is arguable that this is not to be seen negatively, but rather as enabling the abundance of potential funds for research, the university also risks becoming a branch office of conglomerates and corporations, pushing to fund, control, and streamline research and teaching towards their own commercial interests. And there's broad evidence of this, I'm not going to go into it. Technology is thus conceptualized by Derrida as being ethically and politically ambivalent, opening up a space for possible technological organization of the production of knowledge in the university without blocking the possibility of radical social critique. So the student can keep her laptop after all, but on a condition. And here's what I'm going to suggest. That new developments in social critique are going to have to cultivate a collective better informed about inscription through technology. And this can only be achieved through the theoretical imagination of a space where radical politics and science meet. A space in which surely will have to be in an institution like the university for the necessary expertise, at least at first, and which will have to be at least marginally interdisciplinary. As it stands, interdisciplinarity is a concept with minimal critical potential. In fact, interdisciplinarity is currently a market tool, a consumer product to be sold to prospective students and to the joy of parents. It is simply a mark of excellence. On the other hand, its potential is to envelop students and staff alike in a classroom where they would be in a position to develop their ethical and political awareness alongside technology by redirecting its ends to radical purposes, and hopefully this time in a less technocratic and more political context. That's it.